Have you ever noticed something strange? The people who manipulate others rarely argue, rarely raise their voice, and rarely look aggressive. They stay calm while you feel the pressure. They say less while you end up explaining more. And somehow, after the conversation ends, you feel like you lost position without even understanding how it happened. That's because dirty players don't win through conflict. They win through your reactions. The moment you feel the need to defend yourself, clarify your intentions, or prove your point, the power quietly shifts away from you. What most people don't realize is that influence doesn't come from saying the right words. It comes from knowing when not to speak at all. This is the deeper insight behind the thinking of Niccolo Machiavelli. He understood that people reveal their weakness through emotion, urgency, and the need to be understood. The more you react, the more predictable you become, and predictability is exactly what manipulators look for. They don't need to overpower you. They just need you to talk, to rush, to show where the pressure affects you. In today's world, at work, in social circles, and even in everyday conversations, the person who speaks the most is often the easiest to control. Meanwhile, the quiet observer collects information, controls their reactions, and slowly shifts the balance without confrontation. Because silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people cautious. This video is about that kind of power, the ability to outsmart dirty players without arguing, without reacting emotionally, and without saying more than necessary. And here's my promise to you. If you stay until the end, you won't just understand silence. You'll learn how to use it as a strategic weapon. You'll feel calmer under pressure, harder to read, and far more difficult for anyone to manipulate. Before we go deeper, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. My silence is my power. Number 1. Silence exposes intent. Most people think silence is passive. In reality, silence is pressure. Dirty players depend on interaction to operate. They provoke, suggest, question, or create small disturbances, not to communicate, but to trigger a reaction. Because the moment you respond emotionally, they learn something about you. They learn what bothers you. They learn what you care about. They learn how fast you react and how much control you actually have. But when you don't react, something unexpected happens. The pressure shifts. Instead of you trying to manage the situation, they start managing the uncertainty. Silence removes feedback, and without feedback, their strategy loses direction. Think about how manipulation normally works. A person makes a subtle comment. Maybe it questions your competence. Maybe it challenges your decision. Maybe it creates doubt in front of others. Most people immediately explain, defend, or correct the perception. And that's the moment control changes hands, because now you are reacting inside the frame they created. But when you stay calm and say nothing, the frame becomes unstable. They don't know if you noticed. They don't know if you agree. They don't know if you're offended. They don't know what you're going to do next. That uncertainty forces them to fill the space themselves. And this is where their real intent starts to show. People reveal more when they feel ignored than when they feel challenged. They talk more. They repeat themselves. They add unnecessary details. Sometimes they become impatient, sometimes defensive. Sometimes they try to push harder than they originally planned. What began as a small test turns into exposure. This is why silence is not avoidance. It is observation. Instead of interrupting the situation, you allow it to unfold. Instead of reacting to surface behavior, you watch for patterns. Tone changes, body language shifts, escalation attempts, contradictions. All of this becomes visible when you don't interfere. Dirty players rely on quick emotional movement. They expect discomfort. They expect explanation. They expect resistance or compliance. They don't expect stillness. Stillness disrupts their rhythm, and when their rhythm breaks, mistakes appear. Another important effect of silence is emotional control. When you don't speak immediately, you give your own emotions time to settle. You move from reaction to choice. This alone changes your position. Instead of being pulled into their timing, you begin operating on your own. Control over timing is control over power. The strongest individuals in any environment are not the fastest responders. They are the most deliberate ones. Silence also protects your information. Every word reveals priorities, fears, or intentions. When you reduce unnecessary communication, you reduce the material others can analyze or use against you. You become harder to map, and when someone cannot map you, they cannot predict you. That unpredictability creates caution. This is the hidden advantage of controlled quietness. You are not withdrawing. You are collecting. You are not losing influence. You are shifting it. Because the person who talks first reveals position. The person who stays silent reveals nothing and learns everything. Once you master this, conversations change, power dynamics change, and most importantly, you stop reacting to pressure and start letting pressure work for you. Number 2, control the pace, control the power. Dirty players don't just rely on your emotions. They rely on your speed. They create urgency. They push for quick answers. They expect immediate reactions, because speed weakens judgment. When you feel rushed, you don't observe carefully. You don't think strategically. You respond automatically, and automatic responses are predictable. Predictable behavior is easy to guide, easy to pressure, and easy to use. This is why controlling your pace is one of the strongest silent advantages you can develop. Most people believe confidence means responding instantly. In reality, instant reactions often signal emotional pressure. They show that the situation is controlling you instead of the other way around. Deliberate delay sends a very different message. It communicates stability. It communicates self-control. It communicates that you are not operating under their timing, and timing is where influence lives. Dirty players often create artificial urgency, a sudden demand, a quick decision, a loaded message that expects an immediate reply. The goal is not efficiency. The goal is to prevent you from thinking clearly. When you slow down, their strategy weakens. A pause creates space, and space creates clarity. During that pause, you notice details you would normally miss: tone, intention, hidden pressure, inconsistencies. You begin to see whether the situation is genuine or engineered, but the psychological impact goes even deeper. When you don't respond right away, uncertainty begins to build on their side. They start wondering, did it work? Did they notice? Are they upset? Are they thinking? What are they going to do? That uncertainty shifts emotional weight back toward them. Instead of you managing the situation, they begin managing their own doubt. This is how silence and timing work together. You are not ignoring. You are choosing the moment that gives you the strongest position. Another important effect of slowing your pace is emotional neutrality. When you wait, your initial feelings settle. You move from impulse to intention. Decisions made from calm thinking are harder to manipulate, harder to challenge, and harder to reverse. Dirty players depend on emotional immediacy. They want frustration, fear, or defensiveness to guide your actions. Time removes emotional heat, And without emotional heat, their leverage disappears. There is also a reputational impact. People who react instantly appear reactive. People who take their time appear deliberate. Observers associate calm timing with authority. Over time, others begin to approach you more carefully because they know you cannot be rushed. Control over pace also prevents information leakage. Quick responses often reveal priorities and pressure points. Measured responses reveal very little. The less others can read your urgency, the less they can influence your decisions. This does not mean delaying everything or becoming distant. It means refusing to operate under someone else's emotional clock. You respond when you are ready. You decide when you have clarity. You move when the timing strengthens your position. Because the person who controls the pace controls the direction. Speed serves pressure. Timing serves power. Once you stop reacting on demand, dirty players lose one of their strongest tools. And when they can no longer rush you, they can no longer steer you. Number 3, never reveal your emotional temperature. Dirty players don't study your words first. They study your emotional temperature. They watch your face, your tone, your body language, your energy, because emotions are signals. The moment someone knows what affects you, they know where your leverage is. If they see frustration, they know they touched a nerve. If they see anxiety, they know there is pressure. If they see defensiveness, they know you feel exposed, and once they find that emotional entry point, they will use it again. This is why emotional neutrality is one of the most powerful silent defenses you can develop. Most people believe honesty means expressing how they feel in the moment. But in competitive environments, visible emotion becomes information, and information creates vulnerability. Dirty players often test emotional reactions in small ways. A dismissive comment, a delayed response, a subtle contradiction. They are not always trying to win immediately. They are measuring you. They are asking one silent question: what moves this person? If you react visibly, you give them the answer. But when your emotional temperature stays steady, their testing produces no data. They cannot tell if their tactic worked. They cannot tell if they should escalate or change direction. Uncertainty begins to replace confidence. Emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It is about managing what you display. You may feel irritation, disappointment, or concern internally, but externally, your response remains calm, measured, and unchanged. This consistency creates psychological friction for anyone trying to influence you. People expect emotional cause and effect. They expect pressure to create visible reaction. When reaction doesn't appear, their sense of control weakens. They start adjusting. They become cautious. They begin questioning their own approach. Another important advantage of emotional neutrality is clarity. When you don't react outwardly, you stay mentally detached from the situation. Instead of being pulled into the emotional tone of the interaction, you observe it. You notice escalation attempts. You notice manipulation patterns. You notice shifts in behavior. Distance creates awareness. Emotional visibility, on the other hand, pulls you inside the dynamic. Once you react, your focus moves from observing to defending, and defense always reduces strategic awareness. There is also a reputational effect over time. People who cannot read your emotional state become careful around you. They avoid unnecessary pressure because they cannot predict the outcome. They do not know what affects you, what doesn't, or how far they can push. Uncertainty creates respect. This does not mean becoming cold or distant. It means becoming stable. Your reactions are intentional, not automatic. Your tone does not change under pressure. Your presence remains consistent regardless of the situation. Stability makes you difficult to influence, and difficulty increases your position without confrontation. Dirty players rely on emotional feedback to adjust their behavior. Remove that feedback, and their ability to steer the interaction disappears. Because when your emotional temperature stays controlled, others cannot find your leverage. And when they cannot find your leverage, they cannot control the direction. Number 4. Let them talk themselves into exposure. Most people think influence comes from saying the right thing. In reality, influence often comes from saying less and letting the other person say more. Dirty players depend on control of the narrative. They want to guide the conversation, shape perception, and manage what information becomes visible. But this control only works when the interaction stays balanced, when both sides are speaking, explaining, and reacting. The moment you reduce your verbal presence, the balance shifts. Silence creates space, and most people feel uncomfortable with empty space. When there is no immediate response, people naturally try to fill the gap. They add more details. They repeat themselves. They clarify points that were never questioned. Sometimes they even reveal motivations they originally planned to hide. This is not manipulation. This is human psychology. Silence creates psychological tension, and tension makes people talk. Dirty players are especially vulnerable to this because they rely on careful positioning. Their words are usually measured, calculated, and limited. But when they feel the conversation is slipping out of their control, they begin compensating. They explain more than necessary. They push harder than planned. They introduce new points too quickly. They contradict earlier statements without realizing it. What started as a controlled approach turns into exposure. Most people interrupt this process by responding too early. They challenge immediately. They defend instantly. They try to correct the direction of the conversation. And by doing that, they remove the pressure. The key is restraint. When someone makes a questionable statement, you don't have to argue right away. A calm pause is often more powerful than a counter-argument. When someone presents a weak explanation, you don't need to attack it immediately. Silence allows them to expand, and weakness becomes visible on its own. Another powerful tool is minimal response, short acknowledgements, neutral expressions, simple questions that invite them to continue, not to confront, not to challenge, but to keep the information flowing. The more they speak, the more patterns appear. Tone shifts, defensive language, over-justification, small inconsistencies. All of these signals become visible when you are not competing for control of the conversation. Observation replaces reaction. There is also a strategic advantage here. The more someone talks, the more they invest psychologically in their own version of events. That investment often pushes them into stronger claims, firmer positions, and riskier statements. And the stronger their position becomes, the easier it is for others to see its flaws. Over time, people who interact with you will begin to notice something different. Conversations around you become more careful. Others choose their words more deliberately because they know you are not rushing to speak. You're listening, analyzing, and remembering. Listening creates quiet authority. Dirty players expect resistance or compliance. They rarely expect patience. They rely on emotional movement, not controlled stillness. When you let them talk without interruption, they lose control of pacing, structure, and restraint. And eventually, they reveal more than they intended. Because the person who speaks less controls the space. And the person who controls the space controls what becomes visible. Number 5. Remove the reward of your attention. Dirty players are not always looking for control. Many times they are looking for something even simpler: Attention. Attention is energy. It confirms relevance. It tells the other person that their behavior is working. Whether the reaction is positive or negative doesn't matter. Frustration, defense, argument, or emotional engagement, all of it feeds the same thing. Recognition. Once someone realizes they can pull your focus whenever they want, a quiet dependency forms. They don't need to overpower you. They only need to trigger you. This is why one of the most powerful silent strategies is selective attention. Most people give attention automatically. A provocative comment appears, and they respond. A subtle criticism is made, and they defend. A passive-aggressive message arrives, and they feel the need to clarify. Each reaction reinforces the behavior. From a psychological perspective, attention is a reward, and rewarded behavior repeats. Dirty players understand this pattern. They test small disruptions to see what pulls your focus. If you react even slightly, they know where to apply pressure next time. But when attention disappears, something changes. Without emotional engagement, their actions lose impact. Without visible reaction, they lose feedback. Without feedback, they cannot measure influence. And when influence cannot be measured, motivation drops. The key here is emotional disengagement without confrontation. You don't argue, you don't explain, you don't show irritation. You simply reduce the level of energy you give. Responses become shorter. Tone remains neutral. Engagement stays minimal. Over time, the interaction becomes unrewarding for them. There is also a deeper psychological effect. When someone expects attention and doesn't receive it, uncertainty grows. They begin to question their approach. They may escalate briefly, trying to regain the reaction. But if the lack of engagement remains consistent, the pattern eventually fades, because effort without reward feels pointless. Many people struggle with this because they confuse attention with politeness or strength. They believe responding to everything shows confidence or control. In reality, constant engagement signals availability. And availability reduces your leverage. Selective attention communicates something different. It shows that your focus is limited, intentional, and not easily redirected. People begin to recognize that access to your attention is not automatic. That recognition changes behavior. Interactions become more respectful. Provocations become less frequent. Unnecessary tension decreases. This approach also protects your mental energy. Every emotional reaction consumes focus. Every unnecessary exchange pulls your attention away from what actually matters. By choosing where your attention goes, you protect your clarity and your stability. Dirty players operate through emotional access. When that access becomes difficult, their influence weakens naturally. No confrontation is required. No explanation is necessary. The absence of reward does the work. Over time, the dynamic shifts. Instead of you reacting to their behavior adjusts to your boundaries. Because the strongest signal you can send is not resistance, it is indifference, and when your attention is no longer easy to earn, your position becomes much harder to disturb. Number 6. Protect your information by speaking less. In any power dynamic, information is leverage. Dirty players are not always looking to defeat you directly. Many of them are simply collecting data. They listen carefully, not to understand you, but to map you. Your priorities, your worries, your plans, your relationships, your frustrations. Every detail helps them predict your behavior. And most people give this information away freely. They talk to build connection. They share to appear honest. They explain to appear cooperative. But excessive openness in the wrong environment creates exposure. Every time you speak about what stresses you, someone learns where pressure can be applied. Every time you reveal your goals, someone understands what you're trying to protect. Every time you discuss your doubts, someone sees where your confidence is not stable. Dirty players don't need to attack randomly. They wait, they observe. Then they apply pressure exactly where it will have the most effect. This is why controlled communication is a silent form of strength. Speaking less does not mean being secretive or unfriendly. It means being intentional about what you reveal and when you reveal it. Not everyone needs access to your thinking. Not everyone needs to understand your plans. Not everyone needs to know what affects you emotionally. When information becomes limited, prediction becomes difficult. And when others cannot predict you, they cannot plan around you. Most people underestimate how much their casual conversation reveals. Complaints about workload reveal pressure. Talking about personal conflicts reveals emotional triggers. Sharing future intentions reveals timing and direction. Individually, these details seem harmless. Together, they create a clear psychological profile. Dirty players pay attention to patterns like this. They remember what frustrates you. They notice what motivates you. They track what you react strongly to. Over time, they know exactly which situations will push you off balance. Reducing unnecessary sharing breaks this process. When your communication becomes concise and neutral, fewer patterns appear. Conversations stay surface level unless trust is earned. Your internal priorities remain private. Your emotional state stays controlled. This creates strategic ambiguity. Ambiguity makes people cautious. Without clear information, they hesitate to make assumptions. They move more carefully because they don't know how you will respond or what matters most to you. There is also a perception effect. People who speak selectively are often seen as more composed and more deliberate. Their words carry more weight because they are not constant. When they do share something, others pay attention. Restraint increases perceived authority. This approach also protects you from indirect manipulation. When others know your plans too early, they can create obstacles. When they know your concerns, they can introduce doubt. When they know your deadlines, they can apply timing pressure. Limited information removes these opportunities. The goal is not silence in every situation. The goal is control over disclosure. You decide what is shared. You decide when it is shared. You decide who earns access. Dirty players rely on voluntary information more than forced information. When that flow slows down, their ability to influence decreases naturally. Because the less others know about your internal world, the harder it becomes to move you from the outside. And when your information is protected, your position becomes much more stable. Number 7. Turn observation into advantage. Most people underestimate the power of quiet observation. They assume influence comes from speaking louder, acting faster, or asserting authority. But Machiavellian wisdom shows us that the real edge lies in understanding before acting. Observing carefully allows you to see the patterns that others miss, the subtle cues that reveal intent, and the gaps that expose opportunity. Dirty players rely heavily on assumptions. They test your reactions, measure your consistency, and interpret your habits. When they believe they understand your triggers, they feel in control. But observation turns the table. When you watch without immediate reaction, you gather intelligence without giving any in return. Every glance, every hesitation, every word becomes a piece of their strategy, but also a piece of yours, once you know how to read it. Observation requires more than seeing. It requires interpretation. Notice who is trying to assert dominance subtly. Notice who is over-explaining or repeating themselves unnecessarily. Notice the moments when someone is uncomfortable in a discussion or quick to redirect attention. These are clues. They reveal priorities, insecurities, and tactics. A person who overcompensates for a perceived weakness is signaling exactly where pressure can be applied, but only if they are unaware of your attention. Timing is crucial. Observing without commenting allows you to store insights for moments when acting will be most effective. Impulsive responses give away awareness, but patience allows you to act decisively. You choose the moment when the advantage shifts in your favor. The dirty player may believe they have momentum, but your awareness allows you to predict their moves, anticipate escalation, and exploit hesitation. Observation also prevents you from being baited. Dirty players often provoke intentionally, hoping for a reaction that confirms their assumptions. If you respond immediately, you hand them control. If you watch quietly, they expose themselves. Their inconsistency, miscalculations, or over-reliance on certain tactics becomes visible. Every small misstep is data. Every subtle contradiction is a chance to understand intent before deciding on action. This strategy creates psychological tension for others. When people realize that their usual tactics are being tracked rather than reacted to, they become cautious. They second-guess themselves, delay moves, and over-explain. Silence and patience transform them from aggressors into performers, revealing their plan without any confrontation. Observation also sharpens self-awareness. As you watch others, you see your own blind spots. You notice what reactions you are prone to and what signals you may be unintentionally giving. Controlling what you reveal while absorbing everything around you creates an unshakable position. When you turn observation into advantage, you no longer chase outcomes. You allow the environment to unfold in a way that benefits your position. You act only when clarity and leverage are undeniable. Dirty players may try to manipulate, but without access to your responses, they operate in uncertainty. Number 8. Master the power of controlled withdrawal. One of the most underestimated strategies in dealing with manipulative individuals is learning when and how to step back. Dirty players thrive on interaction. They feed on responses, engagement, and attention. Every reaction you give is a signal they can measure and manipulate. But when you remove yourself strategically, the balance of power shifts almost instantly. Controlled withdrawal is not avoidance. It is intentional. It is choosing when your presence serves your advantage and when it doesn't. Most people remain entangled in every argument, discussion, or confrontation because they believe retreat signals weakness. In reality, retreat can create far more leverage than confrontation because it forces the other party to operate without predictable feedback. When you step back, a subtle but powerful psychological pressure emerges. People begin to question their own actions, assumptions, and decisions. They may escalate in an attempt to regain control, or they may hesitate, unsure of the boundaries you've established. Either way, the uncertainty created by your absence creates influence without a single word spoken. Dirty players often rely on momentum. They expect immediate responses, emotional engagement, or validation. Removing yourself disrupts that momentum. It forces them to operate in a vacuum where their calculations are less reliable. Without constant feedback, their tactics lose precision, and their sense of control diminishes. Withdrawal also allows you to conserve energy. Emotional engagement, argument, or over-explaining drains focus. When you step back, you protect your mental and emotional clarity. You regain perspective, observe patterns without interference, and wait for a situation where action is most advantageous. Patience becomes your silent weapon. The act of stepping away communicates something critical. Your attention is valuable. It establishes that your presence is a choice, not an obligation. People notice this, even subconsciously. When they realize access is no longer guaranteed, they begin acting differently. Their provocations may reduce, their calculations become cautious, and their efforts to manipulate lose consistency. Controlled withdrawal also strengthens internal positioning. By choosing when to engage and when to disengage, you reinforce your autonomy. You are no longer at the mercy of external provocations. You act from principle, not reaction. This clarity of internal authority makes you inherently harder to influence. Importantly, withdrawal does not require drama. It is quiet, composed, and deliberate. You do not justify or explain your absence. You simply act from alignment, not compulsion. The power lies in the unpredictability of your engagement. People learn that every attempt to pressure or provoke is met with measured restraint rather than impulsive reaction. When applied consistently, controlled withdrawal transforms your environment. Dirty players find fewer openings, your boundaries become respected without confrontation, and your influence grows silently but decisively. Mastering this principle completes the framework of silent, strategic dominance. If you've stayed with me through this, you now understand something most people never notice. Power isn't loud. It isn't in arguments, explanations, or constant action. Real influence is quiet, precise, and invisible until it's undeniable. Dirty players will continue to test boundaries. They will continue to provoke, mislead, and measure reactions. That's their instinct. But when you apply what you've learned, strategic silence, selective attention, controlled withdrawal, and observation, you change the game entirely. You no longer react to them. You shape the environment without raising a voice. You let them reveal themselves while you remain untouchable. This is not about cruelty or deceit. It's about self-command. It's about understanding that your energy, your focus, and your presence are valuable resources. Once you treat them as such, others do too. They begin to calculate before acting. They hesitate because the easy leverage they once had is gone. They discover that interacting with you has a cost they cannot predict. The most dangerous people are not the aggressive, the loud, or the overtly cunning. They are the unreadable, the ones who operate with awareness, who act deliberately, and who give nothing away unnecessarily. That is the position you now occupy. The one who moves without being moved. The one whose mind cannot be read, whose reactions cannot be anticipated. Remember, mastery over others begins with mastery over yourself. When you stop explaining, stop justifying, and stop reacting on demand, you reclaim control. When you walk away strategically, observe without interruption, and limit what you reveal, you create a position of power that no manipulation can penetrate. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to prove your intentions. You don't need to correct every misconception. What matters is your alignment, your clarity, and your ability to remain calm while the world around you reacts. So, move forward quietly. Act deliberately. Let others exhaust themselves against your restraint, because influence is earned through composure and untouchable power is revealed in silence. Now, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable.